Today on the podcast, we have Arnold. I met Arnold in El Salvador in 2021, sitting across from me in a restaurant hotel. He was at another table, and we just got to talking, and a lot has happened since. So my first question is going to be, Arnold, how did you end up in El Salvador specifically in 2021 September when the whole world is going through a messy time? How did you decide to get on a flight to El Salvador?
Yeah, that's a fun story. I remember it was Essentia Nativa. That was the hotel that we met. That was the name of it. The story leading up to that moment was for 2, 3 years, I was already working into Bitcoin as like a reporter, writing articles. Some of it was just like reporting the news, nothing really on the ground, but I could do it remotely. So I was traveling wherever I could and had fun as a digital nomad. El Salvador announced Bitcoin became legal tender, and I was already in Bolivia and then in Peru. So I was like, why not take a look and see what's going on? I guess I'll meet people. This is historic. This is the first time something like this happened. At least I should be there. I wanted to make a documentary. I was recording like a week before the legal tender, like 2 weeks after, interviewing all the people. And at that time, yeah, we went to El Zonte. We went to well, it's not so big. I think it's like 60, 70 houses, restaurants at that time in total. Yeah, I stayed at Essentia Nativa. I checked in, left my suitcase, went out to grab food, and I saw 7 Bitcoiners on a table, and I was like, let's chat, and you were one of them.
I met a bunch of friends for drinks yesterday, and when I told them that you're working in a Bitcoin education nonprofit, I made the mistake of saying Bitcoin nonprofit. And they were like, how can Bitcoin and nonprofit be in the same sentence? So for a lot of like the general population or even people semi in tech, something like the only idea that Bitcoin brings in your mind is extreme gambling financialization. So a good question would be, I know that that's not who you are. So what was your story of being Bitcoin built in a way, and what drew you to it?
Well, in the end, I only joined my first Bitcoin because that's all we're talking about officially in 2023, I think. But before that, before going to El Salvador, like I said, I was doing reporting about Bitcoin. I wanted it to be Bitcoin only, which is not easy. I wanted it to be high quality. And at the same time, there is so much noise to create in crypto. There's so much sponsorships to take from all the ICOs. So there was always already this balance between doing something that is, let's say, good and something that you just can do, something that I stand by with values and something that just makes money. So there's always been this split already. And along that journey, of course, I started with crypto because it was my first opportunity to work remotely, right? It became Bitcoin only. It became very strict. It became independent articles, like value for value. People support me and it's not someone telling me what to write. So that happened on one end. On the other end, I already volunteered for an NGO in Cambodia for a couple of years, 4 or 5 years. And then everything came together into Bitcoin with Digital Nomad, with NGOs, nonprofit, with independent education, which for me was like reporting journalism back then. And then we also met John, the founder of my first Bitcoin, at that hostel. So yeah, it was just like things were aligned, helping out a little bit. And then in 2023, I joined the team more formally.
Okay, you never actually told me your complete digital nomad story, like, because you were quite young when we met. Yeah, we were both like we're the
Yes.
same age, so we both met very young, and we were both nomading for a while. So tell me a little bit of your childhood. How did you grow up? What did you study? And what did you do before all of this?
Right. So as a kid, I always had a lot of fun learning on school, but it was quite easy. Uh, when I went to high school, I always knew I wanted to become an inventor, creating things. So when I went to university, I started studying product design, which I
Mm.
did on like the bachelor level, not on a master's right away. That's how the school system works, which gave me a lot of free time. Like I think I could do more, but for some reason I ended up at this study, which was fine. During my study product design, got into crypto, Bitcoin together with my classmates. We were reading about it and having fun alongside of our projects, designing washing machines and solar panel systems and like music box speakers. Then during my study, I went to Cambodia for half a year for a product, it was called a minor international sustainable development. So I basically gave up everything that I had, side jobs, etc., in the Netherlands, but I continued doing this hobby, which was writing about Bitcoin and crypto back then, from Cambodia. That's where it sparked like, wait, I am actually earning money abroad with a hobby that is becoming my job. So then I came back to the Netherlands after half a year, graduated still because I need to do this final assignment. But I already knew I would never become like a product designer. So as soon as I got my diploma, I finished university. I started working in Bitcoin, translating books and continued doing it remotely. And then it took me maybe half a year to build a certain base, to then also start traveling alongside of this job. And this is how digital nomading started. Yeah, I think I was 23. And then when I was 24, 25, I think that's when we met. I think I was 24 in El Salvador.
You're Dutch, and that's the it's actually insane how many Dutch people are both in the digital nomad community, the tech community, and the Bitcoin community. Like you guys just like punch way above your like weight class, I guess. Um, what specifically? I mean, the culture now, maybe in the Netherlands is not the same, but you guys outside the Netherlands are just, or like globally, are just doing so well, like always the frontiers, like the new things that come out. What specifically leads to that? Because I'm always surprised everywhere I go, whether it's indie hackers with Peter Levels or um, in just Bitcoin educators, the number of Dutch people is just super high.
I think it can have many reasons. If you go back in history, I think the Dutch were always the entrepreneurs, the first ones to found invent public companies, right? The Eastern Indian company in 17th, 18th century. So that is like maybe part of the culture that always like a bit more okay to take risks and to own and start businesses. At the same time, I think the culture in the Netherlands is very much that everyone speaks English very well. So you're automatically more connected than I think some other countries in Europe. On top of that, during my university, like I was always pushed to do something abroad, at least for half a year. So I went to Cambodia. Like it was highly encouraged to do something like that, which also planted the seed for me. And then, yeah, I think people also generally grow up being quite free. Like the Netherlands is quite a safe place. I always have this story that people don't believe, but for birthday parties, parents sometimes bring you and your group of 10 friends to like a forest. They drop you, and then good luck to find the way back in the middle of the night when it's dark without a smartphone. That is a Dutch cultural thing. And it sounds dangerous, but it is normal. Like, good luck. See you in 2-3 hours. We don't tell you east, west, like you're blindfolded. We drop you there, and the first one comes back home wins. And it's a little bit stereotype, of course, but you get the idea that like it is a bit part of culture to be just out and explore things. At the same time, for me, it was also more like a personal thing that when I went to university, I moved with my family to a whole new city. So I left basically all my friends and childhood behind. Never really connected very well with the new environment. And at the same time, I started seeing the world and I started hitchhiking and couch surfing and such kind of things. And then it all blended together.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, there are a lot of Dutch backpackers too, all across the world. So it went from, so you did your product management in product design or product management?
Product design,
Yeah,
industrial product
product
design.
design. What specifically in terms of inventions got your attention? Because we'll talk about this later, but you created a board game. But
Mm-hmm.
was that always something you cared about, like creating things from scratch? Because you play around with a lot of hardware. So were you into robotics or other things growing up?
I always loved the Knex. I don't know if you know that.
No.
KNEX. It was like the more inventor part of Lego. Like Lego, you just put bricks
Mm.
together, but Knex is like you really can engineer things with like wheels and I don't know how to say it in English, but it was a bit more technical. So you could make like your own fan. Like if you put it with your feet, it starts to move on the top, and all such kind of
Hmm.
things. Like a roller coaster with parts. That's what I always did. And then during my studies, did always like what I liked most were like bringing new concepts into products. Part of it was biomimicry. I remember I loved it a lot to like look
What
at
is
nature,
biomimicry?
see
Okay.
what works well in nature and apply it on the product. So, for example,
Mm.
like there's the lilies on the water; they repel water very well. Like, what if we can learn from this plant and put it on like a fabric of a tent? Or if you look at a tree managed to get water from the roots to the top 5, 6 meters high without anything like a pump, and it's like a capillary system. How does a tree does that? And how can we learn from that to move fluids maybe to the top of a building without needing like these systems? So you can go very far in that, and it was only a small part of my studies, but I like this to see how we can be innovative while looking at nature. But at the same time, it's also yeah, you're just doing so you're taught very diverse. I have people in my class. My classmate one started to work for designing cars, others worked for IKEA, and others work on like 3D plastic recycling units. So like it's very diverse, and you're
Wow.
just taught
Yeah.
to be creative and make all kinds of products, whatever. Yeah, it's more the method of making things than
Hmm.
like one specific topic.
So the thing is, often with engineering types, I don't often see them that interested in finance. So how did you get into like thinking about money? Like how was your childhood upbringing around the concept of money, and then how did it change?
I never cared about it, never thought about it, didn't learn anything about history of money. Or to be honest, when you look at my high school, I did not like economics, I did not like English, I did not like history, and instead I focused more on chemistry and physics. And basically everything I did not like is what I end up doing. I guess a lot of it is has to do with, well, I think in English it is about economics, it's about monetary history, it's about geopolitics. So that is funny. How I ended up there is, I think, just step by step. Like I looked at the whole crypto blockchain space in 2016 from technology, and I wanted to understand why this is so cool and why this white paper was different than the others, and nothing existed in Dutch yet. So I started to translate and make summaries, and that was my blog post. And every week there was a new project. And of course, along the way, you learn that everything is just marketing and bullshit and nothing makes sense. And it's like Dino, decentralized in name only. And along that way, you get introduced more and more to, I guess, the origins of Bitcoin and the history of money, and the gold standard. And wait, gold is not something shiny, but it is something more substance than I thought. And then everything, like the whole rabbit hole, is at your feet, and then you start to learn more. So I would say that because of Bitcoin, I learned all the things that I was never interested in because they were connected together. And when I was younger, I just saw it as like a boring silo of history and a boring silo of economics. And now I started to connect everything to each other, including technology still, and including like all the cool things
Hmm.
of
And
innovation.
how was your environment about money? Because I think I shared this story to you once a long time ago, but growing up, I grew up in a environment of where everyone was employees. So I didn't have entrepreneurial people in my childhood around me. So I remember reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I think Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. And the two concepts which are so simple in the book, but which were mind blowing for me when I was 17 or 16, were that I could just start a business and earn money. And when I
Hmm.
mentioned, and I remember I started thinking about a concept people in Bitcoin think about a lot, which is what is money. And I asked that question to my mom when I was, I think, 17. I was like, Mom, what is money to you? And she said, you work and you get money and then you buy food. That was the only level at which the world I grew up in could understand money, which is you go to a job which is mainly a government job or large corporate job, like it doesn't exist outside that, and you earn money and you buy food. Concept of having the time to think about money more complex than that didn't exist until like books introduced me to that. While
Hmm.
so similarly, you can think about questioning the foundation of how is money created? Like, is it fractionally reserved? How much, at which level is it created by the government? What is it backed by? That's another abstraction above it to just question that. So how was the environment of thinking about money in the people around you that you grew up with? Because Dutch people, like you guys created a lot of like the modern day legal structures. Like I think the Dutch created the limited liability uh, corporations. So how was the concept of money in people around you?
Well, first of all, you mentioned like entrepreneurial thinking. I did not grow up with that at all. I think all the women in my family work in healthcare, like my mom, my sisters, my aunts. Some of my uncles have their company, but I was never really exposed to it. My grandparents, not so much. So I was like employed was just a normal thing to do. Um, I do remember during high school, I did like a project which was start your own company, like a junior company, but it was more coming from like, oh, this is cool to do because I could took care of the web shop and like someone else took care of the accounting. And like in the end, I started doing more project management, but never with the ambition, like, oh, I really want to have like a big company myself. In the end, like I just started freelancing, and that was already quite a big step, just to do like earn your own money, right, and make your own decisions and your own hours. But I've never ever worked for a company. I never have been in an office except for 4 months during like an internship as a product designer. But then the concept, that's more the entrepreneurial thing that was not common. The money thing, I think it's the same. I never had been exposed very much to like what it is. I did grow up like with some kind of critical thinking to not accept everything that is said to some extent, and then but never on the level of money. So that part really came when you take the orange pill, I guess.
So you're one of the few people who like came to Bitcoin and finance in a way after crypto. So like you kind of went in the deep end of actually working in the ICO craze in that whole junk time, and then you came more to structure to just Bitcoin only, and then structured like you understood finance through Bitcoin, which is
Yeah.
actually very different for both for us, which is I actually came the other way around. I entered it more to like questioning money and finance. So I understood central banking a long time, or like I was reading up on central banking a long time before I ever understood um the difficulty adjustment or whatever.
Hmm.
So that's actually quite fascinating. So you just
The
like
complete
jumped in
opposite
the
for
deep.
me.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people, when they hear Bitcoin, and this is the question I'm sure you get the most, which is what is the difference between Bitcoin and crypto? Like, what specifically separates all of them out, and what specifically makes Bitcoin so different than everything else?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe to just tap a little bit into the previous point. As I was copywriting, write about everything happening in Bitcoin, so you suddenly start to have to understand it. So it was like the perfect foundation for me to become, I guess, like a freelancer, because you learn about everything. I didn't know the difference between central bank and commercial bank, but yeah, as you start writing and finding resources and translate, you need to know. I didn't know about ETFs. I didn't know about like options and futures, and like out of a sudden there were Bitcoin futures. Like, wait, what is that? So it was really like learning while writing about it, on those financial topics, alongside, of course, the technical things. Uh, as you go deeper into the rabbit hole and you start to see the wider, like the broader scheme of things, you also start to see that crypto is just something very small. So to answer your question, in the beginning, everything is magic internet money, and it's like, oh, this is cool. We can decentralize some things because, yeah, why not? It makes sense. But then when you really start to understand it from a technical perspective, you start to see that crypto doesn't make sense, because how can you even decentralize everything on the blockchain if you want it to be on so many nodes, and I want to be able to run my own node? So from the technical thing, it doesn't make sense. And then from the financial economic side of things, it doesn't make sense to have a token that is pre-mined, that doesn't have like a limit, that is not predictable in like future supply. And then you start to see like absolute scarcity can only exist once. And that was Bitcoin. Everything else is just like fake additive to what Bitcoin is already doing, and that's the only monetary asset that I see happening or being viable in the digital space. So then, yeah, both from the technical side and from like more the monetary, geopolitical sides, Bitcoin stands out to me. But in the beginning, when I started writing, it was always the most boring one because it existed 13 years and you couldn't do smart contracts. You didn't have DeFi, you didn't have this, and
Mm.
it's small blocks and it's slow
It
to
wasn't
upgrade.
sexy.
It is exactly. So also you had to make that whole shift from like I was writing about all those new things and Bitcoin didn't change. But now
Mm.
I start to see like actually that is the feature.
So you educate people at like different places all over the world. Like specifically, my first Bitcoin as an organization is working not only with educating people but creating communities that educate, and educating educators would be something it
Mm-hmm.
does very well. In that, uh, what have you found to be the use cases? Because most of the world just know Bitcoin to be speculation. Just like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
it's treated as another stock thing, or they've heard of like Silk Road and like using to buy drugs on the internet. So assume we take out speculation and black market things of as use cases. What are the things that you are actually involved in educating people about?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think if you live in the golden billion, so Europe, US, Canada, Japan, Australia, I think that's a billion people, then you have a bank account. You have quite a stable currency. You don't have to worry that your bank account is going to be closed if you say something bad on the internet or you protest on the wrong place. You have rights as a woman, for example, or you have rights as a minority to some extent. Again, to compared to a lot of other places in the world, you have no monetary colonial currency like they have in the west of Africa. You don't have hyperinflation like in Venezuela or Argentina or whatever places. So there's like a million reasons outside of the golden billion to use Bitcoin. And even within this like I guess the golden billion there are plenty of reasons to also embrace Bitcoin, whether it's a CBDC or whether it is reduce the transaction fees when you do international payment like remittances. So like yeah, I think in just 2 minutes I already gave like 10 use cases for different parts of the world, and everyone needs it for a different reason. It's not like one size fits all.
Thing is, oftentimes people's worlds are so small that they can't really understand use cases outside their own life. Like I had a friend who started backpacking from India for the first time, and
Mm-hmm.
she started traveling and she didn't take a credit card because in India she was used to using UPI, which is kind of like the scanning payment thing, and she just assumed it existed in Vietnam or the rest of the world because in her little world you could use UPI for everything. So oftentimes, like, you can talk about a use case like, all right, somebody who doesn't have a bank account can still have a mobile phone, and then they can actually transact without having to go to a village where there's a MoneyGram or Western Union. And I think without those specific stories, without the 30 minutes bus ride that's two ways just to do a Western Union transfer or pay the phone bill that used to be a
Mm-hmm.
Vana journey. Without those specific stories, I don't think people understand it when you say words like remittance, because it just Western Union exists. And without, I think people don't realize the broader context within where all of these specific ideas sit. And Western Union works for almost like the golden billion don't need Western Union. The people below the next billion probably benefit from them, but the last billion probably struggle to use Western Union.
Mm-hmm.
But but they benefit a lot from rails built on this. It's very technical. It's oftentimes very hard to get a software engineer in a large company who can code to actually play around with this. So how do you get people to care?
I started to notice when you tell stories, then it will resonate. It's not just like, oh yeah, it's a digital currency in cyberspace, and you can like lock your energy for 40 years, blah blah blah. Like that is the narrative that works well in the West for some people. Like when you are a boomer or when you're Michael Saylor or something. But you can like tell very inspirational stories, especially if you have been a traveler like myself and yourself, to bring those examples in. one example that I always explain, or maybe two examples, like I was in Kenya 3 years ago. I needed a taxi to go to the airport. So I talked to my host, like, do you know, what would you recommend? It's like, oh yeah, we have like this business card here. You can just send them a message and there's a price on it. So you can, yeah, just arrange it. So I text this driver and he doubles the price. And I was sure that he did it because I was like, how do you call it, a Mzungu? I was a white man. So he would increase the price just because I'm white. But then I started to talk about it during the ride and he told me this business card is from 3 years ago. That was pre-inflation. And like this printed price did not exist today anymore because the gas goes up and everything else goes up. And he said, like, I'm really like, I cannot go lower. And I really believed that. And I understood the history of the shilling here. And now I started to see, like, wait, this is reality. I am putting against this person because I feel distrust, which is actually caused by the financial system. And it was not because like of who I am, but it was literally because the grander scheme of things that I didn't understand about that local situation and that business card being 3 years old. Like, this is just one local story that like you can elaborate on and you can really bring people like in that moment. And then you start to see like, wait, this is how it works. Or like another one is like when you talk to people and a restaurant owner has like 10 employees and none of them have a bank account. So what they do is the store owner keeps the money on their behalf. So he just keeps the salary, and it's like a sub account in this company's business. And then this is how they can have digital savings, but it's not their access. And there starts to be this power discrepancy between the employee and the employer because he still has your money. But like there's no alternative to get a bank account because you need an identity card. And to get an identity card, you need to travel to the big city or you need to pay so much money or you need to have a certain requirements. And then you start to see like, wait, again, there is again this dynamic between people and simply they don't have an ID card. They don't have access to their own bank account, even though they want. So the second best alternative is to ask their boss to keep the money digitally for them instead of having everything under their pillow. So like these are just two stories. And I noticed that when I start telling those, it starts to resonate and you stay away from the very technical things or very much from this is how fiat works and this is like digital cyberspace, blah, blah, blah. And then, you can make it relatable at the same time while people are very far away from where you are.
I have a funny story of where we combine the cultural plus banking idea, which was when I was 18 and I left India. When I was like when I decided to drop out and live in India, I went to the bank to open a bank account on my own. And I don't know if you know this, but India used to be semi-socialist almost until like 1990.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually in the constitution or the preamble of India that it's a socialist republic. So until 1990, India went to something in 1990 called the liberalization, where it actually opened up. And before that, it used to be this very closed country where you needed 50 licenses to sell a car in a different color. So until
Oh.
1990, your world was heavily restricted. My parents grew up in that world. They grew up in that world where it was very restricted. So when you went to a bank to open a bank account, they used to ask you if you had a family member who already had a bank account there. You could not just open a bank account on your own. You needed to bring your father who had a bank account or your uncle who had a bank account, and you could open a bank account along with them. I went to the bank and I said, I'm 18 years old. I'm going to live in India to travel the world. I want to have a bank account in the best private bank that exists in the country. And they were like, bring your parents. And I'm like, no, look at the law. I'm allowed to do this on my own. This isn't the 1990s anymore. But but because this change happened so fast in like 2 decades or whatever, people didn't act that way. They didn't act like they could do that. And I kept on coming up to like vaults where everybody acted like the rules were a certain way. But then once you just pushed against it, you're like, okay, no, the law allows you to do it, but the rules don't. Now, in Bitcoin, often allows you to do that even in the parts where the rules or the laws don't allow it, in the sense of, let's say a woman is in Saudi Arabia or even a more restrictive country for women, she can have money that her husband can't track or lock down, or she can get a job where she's getting paid without him knowing. And that creates a kind of like just underground freedom in a way that people who don't have that take it for granted. And I
Hmm.
think this is something where, like, as technology changes, like I give you the Indian example of how it was so hard to open a bank account. Between the time that that happened to now, you can open a bank account in 5 minutes on your phone. India changed
Right.
so much in the 10 years.
And in between those places, whether it's like real rules or the rules are like getting loosened, like in India right now, there's also this big gap where there's like a glass ceiling. Like you think it exists, but it doesn't really exist there. Maybe because there is taboo to talk about finance as a woman. That's still the case in a lot of places. Like you can still own it, but you don't talk about it, right? Like you're not supposed to be knowledgeable about it. And there's so many different places with like this glass ceiling, where, well, maybe I'm not sure if this really applies, but there are still 14 countries in Africa that have like the French franc. So the
Mm.
currency is imposed on these countries by from Europe. And every time when a country wants to be independent, there will be like this ceiling put back on it again. It's like, no, 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 you cannot be independent. We will do like regime change and put someone in power that is friends with us again, and we'll try to bring back stability. So like every time when you think there is no ceiling, to some extent, whether taboo or when it's like foreign or yeah, foreign like influence, the ceiling will be there, whether it's glass or put back. So I think that is also very interesting to just say like, oh, never mind, I don't care about the ceiling. There's a door and it's Bitcoin. I just get out of this building.
I'm curious if you have a particular moment that was your aha moment. Like, if, because I had a particular moment for me, which was the difficulty adjustment, which is a lot of people are aware of the halvening, which is that every 4 years the Bitcoin supply is cut in half. But the difficulty adjustment kind of like just clicked something for me in my mind that I actually remember where I was, where I read it. So I got introduced to the idea in the Bitcoin Standard, and I was listening to the audiobook, and I think I got introduced to the initial ideas in the book, and something about my mind of the difficulty adjustment being like the check on the system was something that just made it click to me.
Hmm.
Could you explain the difficulty adjustment for the audience, and then also tell me what idea in a way clicked that for you, if there was any particular idea where it just clicked for you more than anything else within the system?
Yeah, so difficulty adjustment is something that happens in Bitcoin, that every 2 weeks it recalibrates back to a certain balance. So right now, if you look at gold, if the price of gold goes up by 3 times, all the miners will have more, I guess, reasons and also capital to invest to find more gold, which then brings the price down to some extent. There's going to be more supply because the price is high. Because of that, people can invest more into digging into the ground. So that is like almost like bringing the price down. How Bitcoin is doing that, if the price goes up, and miners earn more, they invest more in mining equipment. The blocks are going to be found faster, so new Bitcoin is dug out of the ground faster. But every 2 weeks, Bitcoin recalibrates to see how fast it's actually being mined, to make it more hard or more easy to do this, which brings like the issuance of new tokens, of new coins, to like a certain rate that is predictable, to like a quite certain extent. Like there's always some variables, but average there's going to be one block in 10 minutes, and you know that block will bring in 3.125 Bitcoin. So that's a little bit how it works. For me, when it really opened my eyes, it's not one particular moment, but when I started to slowly shift from, I looked at crypto and Bitcoin was one of them, to wait, I should not compare Bitcoin to all the other altcoins. I should compare it to this gold or to the macroeconomical forces and not to all these shitcoin forces. So like I just slowly started to detach it from crypto and put it into like the geopolitical world, monetary history, like these bigger stories where it actually is competing with gold for this exact reason, and to some extent also with the dollar and the euro and all fiat, but they don't even have a more weak difficulty adjustment than gold has. But Bitcoin is superior. So that was my aha moment. Also, I think while reading the Bitcoin Standard amongst other books as well, that I started to take Bitcoin out of one bucket and put it into another and started to compare it with something much bigger.
One idea which I really liked, which I've been thinking about, that has maybe pushed people away from it, is a lot of the parts of the system are messy and held together by game theory, which is the Byzantine general problem. It's can you when you're giving this answer, can you describe it? But Bitcoin seems to have solved it in practice, but not in theory, which is there's always a part of the system where it can override the Byzantine general's problem in theory, but just because of the practical nature of reality right now, unless you have mind control on everyone in the whole world, you're not going to actually override it in reality. So that has oftentimes been this thing where you can convince a computer scientist that okay, it has solved the problem, because it hasn't solved the problem in a way you would solve a maths equation. It solved it in reality, in the real world, in
It's like
meat
almost a
land.
social solution.
Exactly. And that's messy. A social solution that works and will most likely work with 99% certainty, whatever, is a bit too messy for people who are looking for a objective solution. So can you explain the Byzantine general's problem and and how it's solved?
So yeah, imagine there are 5 generals that all want to attack the same city, Byzantine, and they all know that they will only succeed if all of them attack at the exact same moment from different angles of the city. The only problem is like how can they attack all at the same time, because they need to communicate with each other. So that means like someone on a horse has to go like 10 kilometers to the other general in the other camp to tell we attack in 5 minutes, at 10 minutes at this certain time. But how do you know that this person is not corrupted, because the message will be altered, and now out of a sudden maybe 2 out of 5 are going to attack on a different moment. So there is always like a huge risk in these decentralized systems where communication needs to happen to agree on consensus, which is the consensus to attack at this time in this moment. So that is the Byzantine's general problem, where with the internet and with encryption and with some kind of anti-fragile system, a robust system where you can maintain this yeah, what you stand for is what other people also see. It cannot be corrupted by or intercepted or changed because of encryption, because of your private key, because of whatever the way nodes communicate with each other. And now we have this closed system where the consensus is clear, simply because everyone doesn't use like a horse anymore, but they use something else to talk to each other. This is what we stand for. This is when we attack. This is when we have a new block. This is when we do like this certain thing in Bitcoin. This is how we exchange information. And now, out of a sudden, we reached the goal, which was to attack the city.
So the game theory thing is kind of like it's profit driven at every level, except maybe the nodes. Every player in the game, whether it's miners or speculators or just hodlers, are invested by their like self-interest. And the thing that keeps the system in check isn't good people. It's not good people who are maintaining the system. It's just self-interested people. And that's actually the foundation of Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations, which is the entire
Mm-hmm.
idea of capitalism is capitalism can only work if people don't have to think. And in the more precise sense of you should not have to be hyper educated and have a philosophy or economics degree to be able to do economics. You should be able to just pursue your self interest, and in an economy that isn't having monopolies, that just has a competitive nature, that leads to the greatest outcome for everybody. And that's basically how Bitcoin mining works, which is each player just pursues their absolute self interest. And for the most part, the only externality is better security.
Right. Yeah, and a funny connection as well is like I told you, I was never interested into economics, because I was always taught economics is this formula where you calculate GDP, where you have unemployment rates, where you have this and where you have that. It was all like these calculations to try to capture reality. And then Bitcoin brings you to Austrian economics, which is this whole social part again, where of human action, where humans decide personally in their own interest, and this is what shapes your reality. It's the opposite that we try to capture it with math, but it's actually a result of our actions. And the ironic thing is that Bitcoin is so much information. It's only information. You would say it fits perfect with Keynes because you can do all these calculations and you can see exactly what happens. But it is the philosophy of Austrian economics with this game theory and the way people interact with each other out of this, financial interest on the long term to do certain things and contribute or hold it or spend your Bitcoin. So that's a very interesting connection.
One of the greatest things I would say, I'm going on a diversion here, but I've talked to a lot of people who were involved in protest movements and other movements from the 70s and before. And many of them have, when they've gotten honest about the entire times, they've said that the thing that, like, even in the movements that didn't make a difference, like we might be talking about the Vietnamese War, and then somebody will who actually read a lot of history will be like, the CIA was actually helping us um, raise awareness to stop the Vietnamese War because they even wanted it to stop. So then a person would be like, okay, we weren't. It wasn't just our emotions that made it, that stopped the war. It was a much more coordinated thing, and we didn't change that much. Society changed a little, but not a lot. But the thing that mattered the most was those movements served as shelling points that brought like-minded people together, and that created the community. And the greatest reward was the community because you could then create other social changes with the community. So
Mm-hmm.
the funny joke becomes that a lot of social movements from the past were actually shelling points for the friends you made along the way. Now, Bitcoin, one subtle thing that's also really good is it brings together extreme people. You've got a lot of just absolute degenerates that will always be attracted to this place, and you often also meet the best people. So my question is, now that over the past few years has entered a completely other stage. It's gotten involved in geopolitics. Political parties are pandering or being against it. It's gotten real in a way. How do you, how does that feel to you?
I think the more adopted or captured, whatever you want to call it, it becomes, the more funny it is to connect with the people that have it as like a lifestyle and a mindset and a philosophy. The grassroots community that is building on the ground, working on circular economies, on education. It's so much more fun to hang out with those people than to try to follow whatever these guys from BlackRock and all the other ETFs are doing. So I think that it comes back to that previous point. A lot of people look at it from speculation, but if you understand it long enough and well enough, and not through the lens of investments, you're going to meet people that also change their perspective on so many things. And those are the most fun people to hang out with and to spend time with. I guess that's why we met in the first place in El Salvador, because we were crazy enough to go to this grassroots place and not to go to like an investment party to talk about how exactly this ETF needs to be designed or whatever, or released or launched. We were just explaining two
Mm.
concepts about like the general's problem, about the difficulty adjustment, which made me think back to how I explain Bitcoin a lot lately, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I want to make it accessible, and you want it to speak to people's imagination. What I'm developing right now is the analogy of Bitcoin and the pizza. Pizza was invented by someone, we don't know their name, 400 years ago in this place. This person made the recipe of the pizza and started just to make it in his own place. At some point, people start to love it. They came to the restaurant. And every 10 minutes, there is one pizza coming out of this oven. This oven takes a lot of electricity, a lot of heat or energy to produce this pizza. And now this guy has, or Raymond, whoever made pizza, has these questions like, how can I scale up my business? Do I want to become Papa John's with very bad quality pizza, but I can have like a big place, or do I want it to remain craft? So this recipe is open for everyone, so all the guests can make their pizza at home. And now everyone going home with this recipe can start their own pizzeria. But again, it's the same quality that needs to be maintained in every single pizzeria, so not to grow it too big. And now every pizzeria has users, and people start to love it. And now these users are paying for this to make it self-sustaining. And at some point, the pizza source code or the recipe is everywhere, that the government cannot stop the existence of pizza anymore, because it's out there, because it is the recipe. You cannot say you're not allowed to put tomato on dough with something else. You can say, I want to put pineapple to it, but then you're going to make something that is not the real pizza. Like, this is the fork of Bitcoin. Like, you change the source code, you change the recipe. And yeah, this is a little bit where I'm going to try to put all these gameplay, game theory into this analogy of a pizzeria, with miners that is the oven and the cook, with users that are the customers, with node operators who are like the franchise, like the owner of the place that makes sure that the quality is high in that particular restaurant, with pizzas only made once every 10 minutes because otherwise the quality will decay, with a government that cannot stop pizzas anymore, with people that can attack it by diluting the recipe, by adding other stupid things to it that people don't want, CBDCs or Pizza Hawaii. Yeah, you can keep going. Like, the more you think, the more components you can bring into it.
Has your ability to teach or help people been better in real life so much more than online? Because my question is, as we have a society that has a lower attention span, like, this podcast will be something people watch in the background, or they might see clips of it because people don't watch podcasts with the same attention that they used to. In a society where attention is going down, are you finding it harder to have this conversation? Like, just if we are taking the past 4 years, would you say you've noticed a difference?
Yes and no. Like, at the same time as this is, I would say, evolving, you also become more creative and more experienced in educating. So in the beginning, it was just sending information. But right now, it is much more, how I perceive it, is you have to create this experience that people remember the first interaction with Bitcoin. It is storytelling as well, like I just did a couple of times already.
Yes.
And like, for example, I could send you 10 sats right now in 30 seconds, but they're going to forget. But I can send people to a place where a farmer accepts Bitcoin. You pay 50 cents and the food is released on a live stream, and you see all the cows running to the food. And it's like, wow, this is programmable money that works across borders, that I just did to see something happening live. And it becomes this experience that is much more fun than just me and you sending 10 sats to each other for the first time in your life. So it's much more like you have to be more creative as well. Maybe it comes with experience, more storytelling, more taking the complexities out of it, meet people where they are with whatever topic they are interested in, and then also making it like this experience instead of just like a simple, transactional thing.
A lot of the latest things that have at an institutional level adoption, Michael Saylor, MicroStrategy, it's a behemoth that entered the game, that kind of like he plays a game at a different level, and he plays a very financial game, and he sucks out the air out of the room. And like, he's just one person. The president of the US is another guy. All of these people, as they enter, how do you try and, I would say, reduce the noise that they create from sucking the air out of every conversation? Because I know that, like, you'll try to educate people on it, but have you gotten better at kind of neutralizing those issues that people bring up?
I think it comes back to the same point. You have to be inspiring to people. Like, they will read about the ETF and about MicroStrategy and about this and Trump saying things. They will read it in the news, but it is just like a simple piece of text that they read, right? I think the real difference is to provide them an alternative, which is inspiring, which is really opening their eyes, which is more this part that you start to see like, wow, this is cool, I want to be part of it. And I never have that when I see something in the news that I'm like, wow, I want to be part of this. So I think that is the way how we should approach it, not by trying to debunk what all the others are doing or it's going to be captured, but really making the alternative very interesting to become part of. And that comes down to communities, to grassroots, to on the ground, to like having a group of people at a meetup that you can talk to, a group of people that you do a cohort with, and it is not someone that is like on the other side of the world, that is maybe like tweet something that like Michael Saylor or Trump, that this and this is what Bitcoin is. Like, no, it is that local thing that is making it special, and that is how we should capture people's attention and wanting to become part of it.
So the organization right now has been educating a lot of educators. And I remember one of the first people who became a teacher was the taxi driver that John took when he came to El Salvador, which was he had just arrived to El Salvador, took a taxi from the airport, invited the guy for class, and now he's a teacher in the organization in El Salvador. So what is it that makes people want to be educators? Is it people who are already doing things at their community who then incorporate it, or do you have more people who are Bitcoin first and then basically become local community leaders?
So I think there's two different ways to approach this. One is people are already like a teacher by profession. They become a Bitcoiner and they blend it into their education. The others are you are becoming a Bitcoiner because you're taught something and then you want to become an educator yourself. So the guy you're talking about, he was a taxi driver, taught, I think, for my first Bitcoin for 2 or 3 years. But then also, like, he's not a teacher anymore because right now he has his own Bitcoin taxi driving company where he goes and basically implement the brand into his former business that he never really stopped. So yeah, to come back to those two different journeys, I think a lot of people just got inspired so much that they want to become part of it in one capacity or another, whether it is to become an educator and share whatever you just learned, or to become part of it by providing a service like a taxi driving company in this certain ecosystem. I think that is the whole part, that we need not to just send information transactionally, but to really make them part of the movement, where it is as a teacher or as a driver or as an artist or as a designer or whatever. Like, everyone has something to provide.
One of the people who I really love in this community is Jeff Booth. Has a lot of his book, The Price of Tomorrow. He changed the way I look at a lot of things, and he predicted a lot of what's happening right now when it comes to AI and inflation and deflation being a solution to the world. And one of my questions is, in the Bitcoin space, there are a lot of theories and ideas, especially around Austrian economics, that they work. Like, I feel like they might fail or not be enough for the world that we're going to, because it's kind of like Das Kapital. Das Kapital was written before the Industrial Revolution, which is it predicted the fall of in capitalism before industrial capitalism even existed, and it which meant that it could not incorporate it within its theories. And a lot of the schools of economics, whether it's Austrian economics or even Keynesianism, it's like all of them were based on a much slower world. It was based on slow communication, slow movement of money,
Right.
slow movement of information, and significantly less knowledge. Like, knowledge was something that that was trained in like years or something. It wasn't this world where everybody immediately has a PhD in their a PhD level knowledge for near free in their pocket soon. And I think the this is where I'd like to bring together two ideas, both from John and Booth. Is in a podcast John did many years ago. He said people, it's not only that we need to adjust to change, we need to adjust to ever increasing change. And Jeff Wood predicted that like AI would change everything. His example of folding the piece of paper, you don't notice it until it just accelerates. And I think we are all going through one of those massive folds. And when that happens, I feel a lot of the models and a lot of the language that Bitcoin uses, the Austrian economics, a lot of these ideas, I like them, but I think they often hold people back because it ends up becoming where everybody parrots the same ideas in a way. Does that make sense to you?
The first thing that I'm thinking about is Bitcoin and fiat are like two extremes. So the whole paradigm that we put on fiat won't work on Bitcoin, whether it's capitalism or socialism or the deflationary boom that doesn't fit with fiat may fit with Bitcoin, blah blah blah. My biggest takeaway, like that I'm still think is highly underappreciated, is fiat is a system where you engineer the rules to change people's behaviors, whether it's saving, consuming, and everything in between. So you try to steer the economy with the levers. Bitcoin doesn't have those levers, so the only thing it can do is to shape people around it. So the people need to change their behavior in order to fit in the system. Whether you put a name on it, it's capitalism because you want to interact, whether it's socialism because you want to take care of each other, I don't care. But like, it's such a big difference that in fiat, you are manipulated to do certain things by the system. And with Bitcoin, you start to change your behavior because the system only works that way. And with that, I mean like time preference, like long-term thinking. You're not forced to do it, but in some way, everyone is long enough in Bitcoin starts to see to change their perspective on a lot of things. And when I just see those two things, I think that new thing we don't have a proper word for, we will take care of each other, whether it's socialism in Bitcoin. We will trade with each other and like have capital that we put into things, and we call it capitalism. Prices will go down because Bitcoin goes up. And like all these things together, yeah, I think you're right. There's not something that has like been materialized enough or crystallized into a theory that like this is what it is. And AI is going to make it even more interesting to because it does speed up like this dynamic, right? So like the sonic boom, I guess that Jeff Bezos calls it,
Yeah.
where if deflation exponentially increases and inflation too, at some point one of the two cannot catch up and the other will go like extremely high, productivity versus inflation. So yeah, that's a little bit how I look at it. I'm not sure if it's really like an answer, but I like the
It,
concept so much that people
yeah.
change their behavior because Bitcoin doesn't change.
I think of two Bitcoin critics who I've listened to and read a lot of, which is Mike Green and Ben Hunt from Epsilon Theory. And I've spent a lot of time trying to understand what specifically their alternative solutions are. And both of them are anti-Bitcoin. From the outside, it seems that they are anti-Bitcoin, but for the most part, they are just overall anti-financialization. But specifically, I've tried to figure out what were their alternative solutions, and I've noticed that their alternative solutions are either community, like people coming together and creating tribes and helping each other and uh, building up from there, or that they are against monopolies in government, which is something that's become a lot more of a problem the past 2 decades. And I noticed that they um if they had a chance to enter this world more from the good side, because the
Mm-hmm.
bad sides are very noisy to everybody. They notice the bad sides of it so much more. It's a front page news all the time. So they never get to experience the tiny, small changes that happens because it's all at the edges. The everything that your organization is doing is at the absolute edges of adoption. It's not
Mm-hmm.
the flashy center. And when you're working at the absolute edges, the awareness of it doesn't reach people because it's tiny stories that leads to real change over the longer term. Um, but a lot of the ideas which they have outside the anti-financialization part is ideas that My First Bitcoin and the community as a whole I've noticed adopting. But I have a question, which is, you are you a guy who believes that um, Bitcoin can solve a lot of things, like Bitcoin fixes this kind of person, or are you closer to a person who believes that it empowers individual at the edges, and as these communities get stronger locally, that more than just the financial part and the financial freedom part too, but the empowerment of individuals locally in communities with more than just money will be the thing that actually changes things.
I guess I never said this before, but I believe like human fixes this, but human destroys this as well, and that is always like there's always some tension between these two. and whether there is like destroying forces or destroying or like fixing forces on both sides, they're always fed by something. Like humans are fed by incentives, and if those are wrong, humans start to do wrong things. And in the end, it is not like if we have Bitcoin, everything is fixed, but it is exactly what you say, that human layer where these changes will happen. Like I just tried to say, human tried to shape themselves around this idea of Bitcoin instead of being manipulated by fiat. So definitely it is a part of empowerment where humans start to see things can be changed and it is not just fate. And then you have this element of empowerment and with that community as well. And that's where the change comes from, not just from a piece of code that runs on 10,000 computers, but by behavioral change that is more sociological, cultural, a mindset, and more like the human capital, not the financial capital.
Hmm. What have you guys been doing with human rights activists and other stuff like that? Because I know that Alex Gladstein's organization does a couple of things with you. So talk more about all of the things involved in that.
I think we don't foster activists per se, but we provide tools and resources to those who are activists. So we focus very much on education. So if it's a workbook or a tool or an intro course or like an LMS or whatever, activists can use it and they find their way to us. And also know that HRF does support of a lot of our educators that are like on the activist edge of what they do. Um, but I think we just stay focused on introductory education, like really the basics. With that, build strong communities locally where people are becoming part of, and then the activists will stand out. And definitely, there are places where those first community leaders are coming from the more activist side, and then they naturally are included into what they can take from us. So I would just say like. Parallel partners, HRF and us, doing the same things, and we tap into each other's benefits to some extent. Like our educators that use our resources benefit from HRF, and HRF finds the good projects on our end, and that is just a good mix. Well, both remaining like independent
Yeah.
organizations, of course.
So how has the organization changed over the years since you joined, and also how has your role changed during the time?
That's a fun one. Well, let's go to 2021. It was like, I guess, John with a big vision, and you helped, I think, with the website. I did a little bit of teacher training, like a couple of calls, and then locals started to take over after a couple of months, or like after 1 or 2 months, and carry the project as volunteers. And the first ones got paid. But I would say it went from a group of friends to a group of like ambitious amateurs that really did all this together, to something that became much more structured and organized, and like organization. When I joined 2023, I started to be in charge of education network globally, but also social media, communications, events, and conferences. Um, so you can already see things start to be much more structured in terms of the roles and how this organization was handled, and growing. At the same time, it continued to explode. Like it went from zero to like I guess almost 100 projects that I teach the resources in just 4.5 5 years, with 10,000s of students. So it really went from nothing to something really big. And while it exploded, a lot of things break and learn and get improved. But right now, I think it's really, really, really strong foundation, a really good team, and my role also evolved, that I focus only on the grassroots community now. So not on communications, not on events, not on conference, not on social media, on the website, copies and such things. So I really focus on serving educators worldwide and also being the bridge back to the team to close the feedback loop. So they know what's going on with the resources, they can iterate and improve and hear what the real demand is.
All right. So tell me more about your board game. I saw that you created a Bitcoin board game. How does that work? Where you're selling it? What was the idea behind it?
So yeah, this came from like right after I graduated. I was like, okay, I'm in this Bitcoin thing now, but I still have this skill to make things. So why can I not bring them together? Which was quite hard as just someone who graduated first 22, 23 years old, right? Like I'm not going to make my own hardware wallet. And what else physical thing does exist? in the space. So I came up with a board game, and that took quite some time to develop. It's Blockhunters, and it tries to make Bitcoin fun in a way that you can really play with concepts. So mining is not something that is complex math calculations, which isn't even true, but it's rather something like a raffle. You need to pick a number. A private key is like a card you need to keep secret with an identity, like you're playing for this character and you need to collect coins. And a mempool is like some place where cards live with transactions. It can be upside down and face down, and it's transparent but also not, and you have to remember what's where. So it's a mix of like memory, it's a mix of poker, you need to secure your private identity, it's a mix of just Bitcoin game theory all into a game. And this is also bringing a lot of stories in, because all the characters, the 10 characters, have like the stories that I just talked about, whether it's someone from Venezuela with hyperinflation, or someone from Afghanistan without financial freedom as a woman, or someone from Senegal with the colonial currency. So all these items are blended into it as well.
That's nice. Um, I wanted to mention here that so my first Bitcoin is completely community funded. That you got you don't accept funding from large corporations or governments that biases the thing. It's completely community funded.
Yes. And so the game is just something on the side that I did
Mm,
mostly before joining my first Bitcoin. My first Bitcoin does receive money from corporations, but it is no strings attached.
mm,
So it's rather like a grant, or like just
yeah.
you donate and thank you. And we continue sticking on our mission to be independent and impartial. Um, we did never receive any funding from any government. Like we did work in the public schools in El Salvador, but it was always for free. And at the same time, we want to remain like heavily grassroots community funded by just Bitcoiners who think this is important. Yeah, it's just always the goal to make sure we have neutral education, right? So not
Mm.
promote one wallet or one exchange. Like we will never do that. But even if you fund us, you will not get this influence over the resources.
What has been the biggest pushback, and what has been the biggest like tightropes you've had to walk? Because I'm guessing you've had a lot of crypto companies reach out and say offer to write a fact check in exchange for promoting them. So, what has been both the pushback in terms of education, but also the things you had to avoid?
So for fundraising, I'm not too close involved with that, but yeah, I know definitely those stories of big companies that's like, yeah, we do meetups here and there, and what if we fund you and you help us to do this, and then it's branded this way. But like then you already know how before they start talking that this is not the way to go, right? We want to equip people to do things on
Mm,
their own, but we're not going to collaborate, get money, and put your name on it. So that did happen more on the funding side. Like I said, I don't have too much details about this. I think the part of pushback on education, it can happen in many different ways. We did teach in the public schools in El Salvador. We don't teach there anymore. That is, well, that's maybe now a year ago now. So it's, yeah, like if you are completely independent and you cannot be captured, and there's also, yeah, at some point maybe people don't like that. I don't know.
yeah. What are the future plans for the organization, and also what are your future plans, Arnold?
So for the organization, we just launched a couple of days ago a very big release of our curricula, which is in the past the Bitcoin diploma, which is the flagship, is a PDF and people translate it on their own, right? Which makes it very complicated if there's a new revision. It's complicated because people need like Adobe licenses, and there's typesetting issues because some languages are shorter and longer, and there's languages divided from right to left. So like it worked, but it was decentralized. It became a mess to some extent. So now we have a new system where all our content and all our resources live in a content management system. The technology team did an amazing work with like a custom, I guess, design engine where you click a button and every program is generated in a PDF. And now we can do all the transcript on our own back end with AI to any language. You need to plug in a proofreader, and all the resources can be updated with like one click on the button. And even if we improve visuals, the PDF is just improving without needing all these people having their files on their own computer and everything. So I think that's a big thing. it will be the foundation of like going more global than we ever did before. Like now we don't teach in El Salvador anymore. We're not on the ground. We focus on educators worldwide. So we can actually provide them in any language we want, hopefully toward the end of the year when the systems are really more robust and ready. And at the same time, build more, and that is my role, build more systems to properly onboard the community to start teaching. To have the support they need, to have the network they need, a social layer of educators where they can tap into and have resources from. So there is to some extent also a centralizing factor, but in a good way, so to say, if you know what I mean. Like the resources are more centralized, which makes it much more scalable, but still everything is open source. Everyone starts to make resources with AI these days. If we can develop a resource hub, people may be able to tap into it and submit it if they want, and actually find what is already created in the world. And such kind of things, to really work on the infrastructure more than on being in front of a classroom full time with everyone on the team. It's much more like the systems and the tools to make it easier for other people to teach.
Nice. And what are your plans?
So my plans are mainly to make sure the network grows, that every circular economy, every meetup, every homeschooler, and every public school teacher takes the resources and provide them support. Alongside of that, make sure that all these proofreaders will be onboarded properly and we get more and more languages out to create like digital spaces where people can connect with each other, to have something that is more like the student journey that is implemented, as you go from a pre-coiner to like a student to a proper Bitcoiner to an educator to a community leader, to make sure that we roll it out across our own organization, but also I guess worldwide, to bring those structures to see how people can do those things into their own communities. And yeah, like everything that has to do with community growth.
Yeah. And if you had to ask the community, the audience, how can people help? How can just a random person, one, get started? Like two things, which is one, if if they want to learn, if they've just been heard of Bitcoin on the side, the only conversation they've ever had has been around speculation, and they've never had a non-speculation conversation on Bitcoin. Where should they go to? And how can somebody who wants to help?
Think of various ways. In the end, everyone is somewhere on a journey that I just mentioned, whether you're a beginner or just starting to teach or you are experienced. So we have something for everyone. If you're a beginner, you can take the intro course. If you are a little bit experienced, you can do the Bitcoin diploma. If you are a Bitcoiner but you want to become an educator, we have the training program. If you are this educator, you can help with proofreading. You can start your own cohorts. You can join the network of educators, the education network. So there is something for everyone. So yeah, go to the website myfirstbitcoin.org. You'll find all these different steps, and especially if you want to start teaching in your local community, to reach out to me, because then we also give like more one-on-one support to community leaders, to educators, to make sure they really have the right tools already, so they don't have to reinvent the wheel, and get the tools into the right hands. So yeah, that is my call to action. Go to the website and also reach out to me.
Where's the best place for people to reach out?
I would say email Arnold at myfirstbitcoin.org. You can also
I'll add it in
ping
the
me on
description too.
yeah. Once we're in touch, it will be Telegram, but maybe email is the best way to get started.
Perfect. Thanks for coming on, Arnold. Is there anything else you would like to leave the audience with?
Not really. Thank you for having me. Maybe the only thing is that there is no excuse to not teach Bitcoin and to not learn Bitcoin. Like the resources are there, the network is there, people went before you, the connections you can make with them. So if you're like on the fence, like, can I do this? I don't know how to do this. There are no excuses. Like if you want to do something, you can do it. And the best way is to just get started and not wait for permission or wait for confidence or wait for courage. It's just a matter of starting small.
Yes. Thanks for coming on, Arnold.
Thank you, Jeremy.